that in order to make change, in order to be successful, you kind of have to break out of the mold a little bit and be a little bit troublesome.
Hello guys, very excited to have another episode of the Future Skills podcast, despite the rain, despite some of the cold and the flu that might be coming up. But we're here today in central London interviewing someone really exciting as per the project that she's been running for, remind me, Ellie, please, for how long?
5 years now.
5 years now, exciting. So we've got here in studio no other than Ellie Newton, who is here today to talk to us how to build up from scratch, from zero, a community that speaks to people of various walks and talks, business community that brings around some of the best known names in the industries. And we're talking best authors worldwide known. We're talking business people and, you know, the type of stories, success stories that you do want to hear. So on that ground, welcome, Ellie.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Today we're here to discuss no other than the community of Trouble.
Trouble.
Where does this name Trouble come from?
That's a really great question. So it comes from this idea that every single woman should make a bit of good trouble. And the quote originally comes from John Lewis, who was a civil rights activist in the US. And he said everyone should make a bit of good trouble. And so that was kind of pinched into every woman should make a little bit of good trouble. And I think if you look at all the speakers that we have, if you look at all the people who come to Trouble, both who are on the stage and people within our community, they are people who are curious. They are people who are just a little bit disruptive and appreciate that in order to make change, in order to be successful, you kind of have to break out of the mold a little bit and be a little bit troublesome. So that's where it all comes from, this idea of the Trouble Club, and every woman especially needing to be a little bit troublesome.
That's exciting. I think it speaks as well to your character and your traits, doesn't it? In terms of you being, or considering to be a disruptor as well, isn't it? Someone who is trying to mold a change in one way or another. And therefore, introducing these other speakers who come along and share from their experiences is one way forward in that regard. So how would you describe yourself in 3 words of your choice?
Oh my goodness, that's such a great question. 3 words. I think the first word I would have to say is probably I would describe myself as a student. This entire process and what I've done is, you know, building the Trouble Club. It involves me meeting a lot of people, and it involves me meeting a lot of incredible women. And so I'm kind of endlessly curious, and I am the student still. Most of the time, I'm the person who's doing the learning. I'm the person who's, you know, diving into a topic headfirst that I'm not familiar with and being the one who questions the expert on it. So definitely I would describe myself as a curious student. I think I would also describe myself probably as quite adaptable. I think that everything that we've gone through, we've had to really figure out what true community means and what different forms that takes, and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And so I would definitely describe myself as quite adaptable, I hope. And then a third one, oh gosh, it's really hard. What would be my third one? Maybe quite resilient as well. We've been pushed back a lot in different ways. We've had a lot of things that out of our control happen. And so I think certainly myself, and I hope the business as well and the community, I think resilience is a very important quality that certainly I hope that I have, and I hope I would be able to describe myself as, and I hope I'd be able to say that for the community as well.
It's exciting. Thank you so much for the answer. It does explain the drive, I think, the energy, and how you want to really make it happen.
Oh, yes, for sure. I think you have to that's the one thing, is you have to be completely set. You have to be completely purposeful. You have to know exactly where you're going. You know, you have to have your eye on that target, which is odd because the target can sometimes move and it can shift, and you have to appreciate that things change, which means that actually the goals might be different from what you think that they're going to be, but you always have to be kind of heading towards something, and having a clear idea of what that thing is really important.
The next question that I have for you, Ellie, is around the beginnings. Where have you started from? Because having this idea of uniting people from various walks of life, but the disruptors, the change makers, and how to find them, and then how to make sure that they hear about your initiative, your project, it's a big thing, isn't it?
Of course.
Talk to us about the early days.
So I should say I'm not the founder of the Trouble Club. So the community did pre-exist me by a couple of years, and it was a very small thing. It was kind of a very informal thing. But when I took over, what was kind of already there was this idea of bringing people together to listen to incredible women speak. And I think for me, there was so much potential in that. And the reason that I took over was because, you know, when COVID happened, there was this idea that it would end. And I was really, really sure that I didn't want that to happen. And so I could just see the potential, and I could see the benefit, and I could see that there was so much to be gained from being part of a community or a members club that maybe wasn't focused around being inside of a very gorgeous, townhouse, that maybe that wasn't the thing that was going to create community, and that actually what people needed were reasons to talk to each other, and they needed reasons to connect with each other, and they needed someone to do the introduction. They needed someone to give them the topic to which they would discuss. And so that's very much where the origin of the Trouble Club comes from, especially for women. And there was a huge amount at the time, and still is, within London and beyond. There was always a large amount of clubs that were involved professionally, where people would join in order to better themselves professionally, to, increase their potential, to make really good networks. And that is really incredibly important. But I think that something that was missing was that personal, that social, that idea that actually, there's a huge amount of benefit to being a part of the Trouble Club work-wise. But also maybe you just want to make a connection with someone who works in an industry completely different from yours. Maybe you're actually looking for friendship. Maybe you're looking for stimulating conversation. Maybe you're looking for someone to talk about the biggest issues of the world with. And actually there's something I describe. I remember being with a group of friends, and, we were having drinks, and I kind of said, I can't remember what was happening at the time, but something crazy had just happened in the news. And I remember saying, what do people think of this? And someone just turned to me and said, we really shouldn't talk about politics here. And I was like, what? It's like, what? Well, when am I supposed to talk about it? And who do I talk about it to? And that was very much one of the reasons that Trouble exists, because we want, when something big is happening in the world, when something crazy is happening, there's so much going on in the news, there's so much that we are also terrified by, or interested in, or curious, or scared of, or, we need people to talk to about that. And we want to have mature relationships with people. We want to have mature connections. And I think certainly for women want to find those other women who are interested, who are curious, who want to have those conversations about the really big and important topics. And that fundamentally is the origin of what Trouble started as, and it is the goal always for what we're trying to do.
How exciting. It reminds me of the fact that, when you have an idea, and you might not necessarily have all of the answers from day one, right? But the fact that you're saying you have also had this hint that whatever happens in the world that is really big, and you want to make something of it in terms of at least voicing out your thoughts within a circle of people that you trust in. At the same time, you do want to make sure that it transpires that you do care.
Yeah.
It's not like, something is happening around you and you stay still just because it's convenient, it's comfortable, and why not some other people do that the same way. But you really want to make sure that there's a ground, comfortable place where you guys get together and put the news on the table and actually wander around and say, okay, so what's happened this week or this month, or however frequently that happens.
Exactly. I think that that's incredibly important. I think so many of the negative, bad and corrupt things that happen in the world rely on people not talking to each other about it. They rely on creating division. And we're very keen on the fact, people say, I have different opinions on different topics. Am I still welcome? And our line is always that all respectful points of view are welcome, and that you're welcome to come to the table. You're welcome to have the conversation, because people are relying on us not having that conversation to continue to do bad things and continue to negatively impact the world. And we're very much keen on making sure that doesn't continue.
You've made me really curious about the sheer amount of topics that could be discussed. Were there any particular topics that would you say, oh my gosh, these were so popular across all of them that were discussed at the time that, you might want to bring them up again? Or, were there any particular ones that you would say, yeah, very popular?
Oh my gosh. I mean, the popular topics for us, I should say that actually the diversity in the speakers and the topics that we talk about is massive. It's a little bit ridiculous. I go from kind of interviewing an astrobiologist one week to interviewing, Emily Maitlis, the host of the News Agents, the next week, to interviewing, Margaret Atwood the week after that. And it is, an incredible amount of diversity. And that is something that we're very passionate about. But in terms of the ones that are the most popular, we do find that the ones that are slightly off the wall, the ones that are slightly unconventional, bring a lot of people in, because people suddenly think, gosh, yeah, I do want to have that conversation. We have an event coming up that's going to be all about getting fired and what that process is like. And we can sit around all day and talk about, how you can improve your CV, and that's incredibly important. But also, do we not want to talk about why people got fired? And yes, a lot of it might be because of corporate restructuring. It might have had nothing to do with you. And so a lot of that event will be about, how to deal with it when it's not your fault, but also dealing with it when maybe it is your fault. Maybe you weren't the person who was right for that job. Maybe you made a mistake, because we all do. Maybe actually this was the best thing that ever happened to you, because now you can go into a role where you can really thrive in, and how to, make sure that you're putting it right in your mind, and that you're not feeling anxious about something or stressed about something that you don't need to, and you're using every opportunity to, continue to better yourself. But certainly the events that we do with scientists, people find those events fascinating, because I think we all look at an astrobiologist or an astrophysicist and we think, what do you do all day? What is your job like? Because you really are answering the questions that none of us have answers to, and what does that look like day to day? And they come and they share what their lives look like, and they're all women, and they're incredible, and they do exceptional things. And we had recently a forensic biologist whose job it is to help solve crimes by looking at the nature around them. And we did an event, actually, one of the events that really stuck with me and stuck with so many of our members, we did an event last year with Jenny Kleeman, because she wrote a book called The Price of Life. And it was all about the different ways in which life gets valued and how it gets valued. And she met with people who kidnap and the kind of ransoms they offer. And she met with people who were paid to kill people and how much they would charge. She met with people whose job it is to sell body parts to different universities and pharmaceutical companies when someone's deceased, and that they sell different body parts for different amounts, and how the NHS decides how much money they're going to spend on a life-saving drug, and at what point they decide it's worth it, or how many years someone has to live for it to be worth the cost. And that was a fascinating event. We all just had so many questions, because it was a piece of research and investigation that, really got to the heart of what it means to be human and what we're worth as individuals. And the people who make those decisions. Yeah. I mean, yesterday's event, we talk about climate change. Mm-hmm. In almost every single event, it comes up in one way or another. Amazingly, it's something, climate change and AI come into the conversation all the time, because they just have to. But last night's event was with Dr. Julia Shaw, who's a criminal psychologist, but she's turned her attention towards green crime and the people who are destroying the planet in the most heinous ways, and how they're getting away with it, and why we're not applying our kind of true crime detective work to those particular crimes, why we think that they're less important, and how we can reframe that both, for everyone who wants to tackle it and make sure that we still have a planet to live on in the next couple of years, which I think we all do. So, yeah, I mean, I think for us, there have been so many events that have really touched a nerve. And then, of course, you do have the events where you just have a superstar woman who everyone is desperate to just hear. Every single word that comes out of their mouth is like a gem. Margaret Atwood is one of those. Gloria Steinem is one of those. We had Candice Brathwaite recently. She was one of those. Everyone was on the edge of their seat because they wanted to know exactly what she was going to say. And those kind of evenings are ones when people leave on a massive high, and they leave kind of looking around and talking and making connections. And it's incredibly exciting. So, yes, so many events I would love to relive. But I think definitely the ones that I do enjoy are the ones that are probably slightly more niche, actually, and the ones where I get to dive into a topic. I didn't take science beyond GCSE, so when I get to dive into a scientific subject or maths or something that is incredibly important, but I get to come at it from a complete layman, and everyone in the audience gets to do the same, it's really incredible, and it makes your brain do all kinds of awesome things.
You just barely talk about it, but the energy, the drive that comes out, it talks about, the various events that you've put together and the fact that you make people care. And my next question is about that, in fact. What do you think what makes them care?
Oh, that's such a great question. And it's one that comes up frequently, because we have people who look at the most heinous things that are going on in the world. Maybe they're tackling illness, maybe they're tackling poverty, maybe they're politicians who are trying to figure out policies, and figuring out how to make people care is just really incredibly important, because we all have to care, we all have to be involved in order to make any kind of change. Elif Shafak is one of my favourite authors, and she does an incredible job. I didn't know anything about the Cypriot Civil War until I read a book that she wrote about it, about two lovers. I think it was The Island of Missing Trees, that one was called. And she tells these incredible stories through people that you can't help but see yourself in. And I think that is the key. It's storytelling. it's putting people in your shoes, and it's leaving them with something memorable, and remembering that for thousands of years we sat and told stories. And that's really all we're doing at the Trouble Club a lot of the time, is we have people who tell these incredible stories, and often they are laced with incredible and important statistics and facts and things that, is data, but that the stories are what sits with people and what leaves with people. And it's when you get someone who everyone so admires who tells a story. When we had Emily Maitlis last week, and she told stories about her time, at the newsagents, her time at Newsnight. She told the full story of the Prince Andrew interview from her point of view, from behind the scenes. And everyone was just on the edge of our seat, because that interview was so important now, obviously, and probably one of the interviews of maybe, the last couple of decades. But from her point of view, hearing it from her and what she experienced and what she witnessed gave it a whole new light that everyone in the room desperately needed. And it meant we all came away with so much more, and understanding the importance of this moment in a lot greater, in a much greater depth.
So it sounds that from what you're saying, there are obviously a myriad of events happening out there around us, right? Be it from the perspective of the global implication, or be it from the perspective of the local implication, whichever that might be. But you're trying to tap into what interests people, from what I gather, isn't it? And then trying to deep dive into that. So therefore bringing people from all of these, elements and biosis, where you can actually say that is a person who represents a given even event, or a given behavior, or whatever that might be. But it's a representation of a trend, and it is the first source that users within the community have the privilege almost of getting a touch base on, or getting information from. I gather it's not easy to get hold of this first source representative people. How do you do it? How, or where do you find that it's the most challenging part of the process?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, the process happens in many ways in terms of how we get the people to kind of come and share their story. Thankfully, there are people who want to share their story. We had an incredible event with someone called Nina Alk not too long ago, and she was the victim of a horrific amount of domestic violence and an attempted honour killing. And she made it her mission to share her story. And so we're very fortunate that people like that do exist, and that they do want to. I think it helps that our community is female focused, it's female centred. Men can come to our events, they're more than welcome to, and they can become members, but they are in the minority, and they know that when they come. But that you walk into the room, the energy is incredible. And we really convey that to the people who we invite. We really say, look, the energy will be incredible. We will be asked phenomenally important questions by people who share so much of your story, will share elements of your story. And you will do so much good by being in that room and speaking on the topics. No, I'm not sure if something really amazing happened for them or something really bad. Someone just poured hot water on themselves, I'm not sure.
Such amazing.
No, it's totally okay. Yes, no. Editing is all in the editing. But yeah, so there are thankfully these people who really do want to tell the story, but conveying the brilliance of our members, conveying the brilliance of our community, that is what makes it really straightforward, actually, because it kind of becomes a no-brainer. It's of course I want to be in a room with incredible women. I have a story to share, and I'm going to get so much back from them. And they do. We had Dr. Charlotte Proudman, who's an incredible barrister, and she represents, many women in the family courts who are going through really devastating situations, whether they're escaping domestic violence themselves, whether they're fighting for the right to continue to be mothers of their children. And the audience was full of women with stories. And it didn't necessarily get as serious as being in a court situation, but it was something that so much of us could relate to, or so many people in the audience could relate to, whether it was simply trying to wrestle power from someone, even if it was nothing to do with family, nothing to do with relationships, but just trying to assert your authority and being able to keep control of the things that you create and things that you should have agency over. It was a phenomenal evening, and we all left after that with just this spirit of, it's a really special thing to be in a room with women and be able to talk about these incredible issues. So, I mean, that's what we convey to the women who come to Trouble, and the women that we want to come to Trouble. We say you'll be asked incredible questions by our audience. I will try my best to ask you some good questions as well. People will come up to you and they'll tell you things, and our audience is just, brilliant. I remember when we had Carol Vorderman, and she was kind of overwhelmed with, we had kind of neurosurgeons from our audience and top journalists who were kind of coming up to her and saying, like, this is my point of view as someone who works in the NHS, or, because she was at the time talking about a huge amount of the corruption that was going on within the government, within the Tory government at the time. So I think our members are really impressive. And if we put that forward and we explain why it is that people become members in the first place, not just because they want to hear from brilliant women, which is a huge part of it, but also because they want to meet brilliant women and connect with brilliant women who aren't just necessarily within their industry, who could come from any industry. Many of our members are still students, are still, in academia. So I think expressing that and telling them this is the community that you're coming to. It isn't just, a random group of people. It is women who are passionate, who are curious, and you will have an amazing time. You will leave on a high. That's always what we convey. And that's been our most successful strategy.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this. You've just mentioned, I think you said to be on a high a few times really so far, which almost sounds like a slogan, a highlight, isn't it, of your activity, and how people are meant to feel once they've left the room or after seeing and hearing to the stories of so many amazing women. From the perspective of what drives you, I'm really curious in terms of tapping a little bit more about, your beginnings, of your interests, and what has led you step by step into where you're at now. Were there any particular mentors? Were there any particular triggering points or some of your beliefs that have led you here?
Oh, that's such a great question. Well, I should say that I always wanted to have my own business. That was something that I always wanted to do. I started selling candles when I was like 11 or 12, and that was I did. Yes,
my daughter in about 2 years, so that's amazing. All right.
It was if anyone still has them, throw them away. They were really badly made, and I heard that I may have caused some house fires because they were terribly made. I shouldn't have been allowed to sell them, but I tried. And so there was always that. I think I've always been quite self-driven. If I get told to do something, I'm very unlikely to do it. But if I decide that I want to do something, I probably will. And I've always been like that. And so I think entrepreneurship was always going to be the angle that I went down. But I've also always been really fascinated. I've always been very interested by different things, and I've always wanted to absorb lots of different things from lots of different places, whether it be history, science, politics, literature, whatever it is. I always did want to kind of consume as much as I possibly could. And so this opportunity presented the best of both worlds. And I think in terms of mantras, that's such a good question. I think for me, it was always that over the last 5 years, whatever would happen, because there were times during COVID when it didn't look like, we were going to be able to continue. But no matter what happens, and I continue to tell myself this every single day, this has been the best educational experience I could ever have asked for. There is no amount of money you can pay for the experience that I've had over the last 5 years. And so knowing that means that whatever happens, it will always have been incredibly beneficial, because if whatever I do in the future, and I hope to continue doing this for as long as I possibly can, but what I've learned in terms of building a community, what I've learned in terms of building a business is so invaluable. But also the fact that in building this business, I've spent every single week interviewing a different incredible human being is an incredible privilege that I will never forget, and hopefully will be able to do for as long as I can. So I think there's that element of it, which is that whatever happens, this is a great learning experience. And I think that's probably a very good mantra for everybody. Whatever happens, this is a great learning experience. Through the good times and the bad times. Through the bad times, it's a great learning experience. And then I think the other side of it was kind of like, if not now, when? And when I took over, I was 23. And I know. Which was completely ridiculous. And so, it was like, if not now, when? If I don't run the business, if I don't start a business now, if not now, when will I do it? I'm not going to do it probably maybe I think actually there's a huge misconception that you have to be young to be an entrepreneur. Most of the best entrepreneurs are older and people who've come from established industries. So this kind of, young, startup founder is, I think, a little bit of a myth. But also for me at the time, I was ignorant. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And so I jumped. And I think that was really important at the time. There was a kind of what do I have to lose element of it. So I am very glad that I did it then. And also I think to not be afraid to be a dummy. I'm a dummy every single week, because every single week I approach a brand new topic, a brand new person, and I'm a dummy again. It's a very important skill to be like, I actually don't know anything about this. That's completely, not only is that completely fine, that's great, because it's only up from here. and then kind of getting into a topic and learning with your eyes open. And so I think that's also it. Like, if you're wanting to start a business, which I hope if you want to, everyone should if they can, don't be afraid if you're on ChatGPT asking ChatGPT how you write a business plan, because that's totally fine. You don't have to know just how to write a business plan to kind of start out. You know, use anything. Use the resources. Buy a book that says Starting a Business for Dummies. That is the most intelligent thing you can do, is to know that you're starting from that point and to want to start from the beginning and to want to absorb as much as possible. So I think my mantras would definitely be, you know, I think at the time it was definitely, what have I got to lose? And also maybe the fact that I don't know anything, that's completely okay. Let's just go forward and hopefully we'll learn some stuff along the way. And that whatever happens, it will be the best learning experience ever.
Such a fabulous answer, if anything. I wish that, you know, we could take out some quotes from here and then put it somewhere on the screens, you know, just for people, honestly, because what this talks to me about is the fact that you're self-started, you said earlier, right? But aside from that, apart from so many other obstacles that might come in your way, you're also resilient. You're trying to find ways, even though, look, and I'm not just saying this for the sake of saying and making a compliment, obviously. What I'm saying through is some certain traits, and that's also one of the purposes of the podcast as well, of the Future of Skills, is where we're trying to tap into the skills that make people who they are, right? And with what you're telling me, it sounds that even if you don't know an answer straightforward, like from day one, you will research that bit. And it's fine to consider yourself being a newbie in a certain industry or the other, because you're not supposed to know everything. You're not ChatGPT, right? You don't learn like bites of information in seconds. What you do is you have curiosity that then inspires you to then tap into so many other things. And that then inspires me in return to ask you another question, and it is about your habits, because obviously you've got one brain, you don't have terabytes of data in it. But from the perspective of how you satisfy your curiosity, what needs to happen from your perspective so that you can say, okay, so I wasn't a newbie in that topic, but I've researched that so well that I consider myself more or less good to be able to ask the questions?
Oh gosh, so do you mean kind of in terms of the process when I put together for an event?
Very much so, yeah.
Oh gosh, well, I mean, that comes from, I mean, it does completely change depending on the person who it is. A lot of the time I'll be interviewing someone who's written a book. So the most important thing is, if you ever interview someone who's written a book, read it.
Read the book.
Read it. Don't pretend that you read it.
Number
one thing. And you kind of mentioned like wider habits there. And I think something I am really proud of is my habit that I learned a long time ago, that I'm incapable of remembering anything. So I just don't expect myself to remember anything. And so I just write down everything. And I have a really great system in terms of how I kind of puke information into a system that I can then categorize things from later on. But a long time ago, I realized that if I had ideas, I shouldn't rely that they will stick. They won't.
That's absolutely true for anyone.
For anyone.
Yeah.
If you think that you have an idea and that you'll remember it, or even, you know, having the process there. So if you do write it down on a bit of paper, do you have the process and the habit set up to make sure that paper gets into a document that you look at? And, you know, making sure that that system is really streamlined is incredibly important. And that goes for absolutely everybody. Don't expect yourself to ever remember. And I'm amazed when I tell people, you know, things, or I mention, oh, maybe we should go to dinner, and I can see that they don't write it down immediately. I'm like, are you going to remember? I wouldn't remember. I'm not sure, my brain just doesn't work like that anymore. I'm not capable of it. And so, yeah, having a streamline for that process. So you always have your bank of ideas. You always have your bank of information, your bank of what needs to be done, your bank of things that are important, but not urgent, your things that are urgent, but not, you know, incredibly important to, you know, for the bigger picture. Figuring out that categorization system for yourself, and that is for anyone in any role, no matter what you're doing, is incredibly important. And that is something that I think should be taught very early on, you know, in schools, figuring out which...
Interest as well. For the little ones.
Oh, yes, exactly. Figuring out what techniques, what tools. You know, for me, it's an app called Todoist. It's been my favorite tool for a very, very long time, because I think the way in which I can capture something and put in dates is incredibly useful. And then, you know, a bit of Asana, a bit of Notion, but making sure that everything works together and you know where everything is incredibly important. In terms of, for like each individual event, it really is dependent on the event itself. If there's a book, absolutely, it must be read. I will usually Audible it, because then I can take notes while I am listening to it, and I can do things like I can go for really long walks while I'm listening to it. I can, you know, put the washing away. I can do whatever it is. You know, I can keep myself busy while I'm listening to it, which is always really, really good. And again, I think very importantly, listening to my guests on other podcasts and platforms.
Yeah,
is super important, because you want to get the cadence. You want to figure out how they speak. What do they do when they finish talking? Do they, like me, talk a lot with their hands? Are they quite quiet? Do they like to pause a lot? You kind of need to know that going into it, because you don't want to interrupt a train of thought. You don't want to not realize that they finished speaking. You want to be ready with your next question. So that is incredibly important. And again, making sure that I just sit with the topic. And the thing that's always at the front of my mind is my audience, my members. We have what we have at Trouble is we have an immense privilege. People come into our events, they come live, sometimes in the hundreds, sometimes in the thousands. They come live, they sit, they put their phone away. They can't pause us, they can't stop us. They will very rarely get up to go to the toilet, even if they have to, because they know it's not really socially acceptable to do that. So they will sit there and they will listen. And we have the benefit of people's attention for an hour and a half. When else? People do not get that these days. You just don't get that kind of level of attention. And we know that it is an immense privilege that people do that, and that they're not on their phones, and that they have to they want to, I hope, but that whatever happens, they're sitting there for the next hour and a half. So when I am preparing for an event, I look at how we described it in terms of how we put it forward in the event description. And I think, what do people want to get out of this? What information, what stats do they want to be leaving with? What stories do they want to be leaving with? And how do I make sure I bring that out of our speaker in the best way possible? And usually it's really straightforward, because our speakers are incredible. And they also have a great sense of what people want to hear, what people want to listen to.
Ellie, you're interviewing so many interesting personalities that come to the shows, that come to the events. As you said, they can gather hundreds, thousands of people in the audience. Please talk to us a little bit about your members, who they are, how they come up, and hear a little bit more. Is it through referrals, friends and family? Is it through the industry know-how, word of mouth? How does it work?
Oh, it's such a great question, because, our members are the reason that we do absolutely everything. They are phenomenal. They are just incredible. They're incredible people. They are overwhelmingly women. And as I said, men are more than welcome to become members. They just tend to be very outnumbered. We don't have that many, but they are very welcome to become them. But every single event that we do, every single speaker brings in a new audience, which is incredibly exciting. But there is something that is always there with our Trouble members. They are curious. They are people who are very purpose-driven. They are, as I say, overwhelmingly women, and they want to know more. And they do, the jobs that they do are insane. We have these dinner parties where we get to meet members, and we'll have different topics and themes, and we'll often provide conversation cards so people can have little conversations, and we can start them off in different directions in terms of their conversations. But I'm sat next to our members, and when I talk to them about what they do, it's incredible. We have kind of Alzheimer's researchers amongst our members. We have neuroscientists, as I say. One of our members I recently discovered is this incredible woman and campaigner who lost her arm and a leg after being run over by a tube twice. And so she was the first woman in Europe, I believe, to get a bionic, artificially intelligent driven movable prosthetics. And that's who our members are. And they come to our events because they not only admire the woman who's on stage, and of course we do, because we know that there's so much we can get out of them. We know that we can get inspiration out of them. We know that we can get incredible information out of them. But also they come because they know the people who are going to be sat left and right are very similar to them. They're so inquisitive, and they want to know more, and they want to spend their evenings having stimulating conversations, and having conversations that are real and proper and true. And that's not to say that we don't have amazing dinners where we talk about pop culture and romance and whether or not ghosting is or isn't ever morally acceptable. And I think that is the topic of one of our dinners coming up, whether or not it's ever morally acceptable to ghost someone. That's why we do what we do, because of that circle of women who've never met each other before, but who are leaning in and who are in the middle of a very important conversation. And sometimes we know what it's about. We lean in, we see, what are they talking about? Sometimes we've got no idea, but something amazing is happening, and they're all going to leave just with more connection, with more conversation. They're going to leave stimulated. They're going to leave knowing so much more, knowing people and hearing stories that they would never have got to if that dinner hadn't happened. And that is an immense privilege.
I'm so looking forward to this, because I'm a member myself now. So it's an amazing answer. Thank you so much for being here today and for sharing all of these, success stories and how you started off from literally zero to hero. So wishing you guys a lot more to come on your plate and a bright future ahead.
Thank you so very much, and thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure to be here.